All right, everybody, I should be live. So if I am, please let me know in the chat. Otherwise, thank you so much for being here on another Monday night where we're going to discuss some of the things that have happened in this past week that give us warnings and expectations of more SHTF events, because that's just the world we currently live in, unfortunately. So, looks like people are here in the chat hanging out, and we're going to get this thing started. 5x5s are coming in. Off-Road Armada already said so. I do want to mention that Midway USA is the biggest supporter of the channel, and thanks to them, I can get on these live streams, give out good information, and get better equipped and check out gear to review and everything else. So a big thanks to Midway USA, 5x5, ND Prepper 87, David Kramer, Shadow Prepper, Exile Reviews. Thanks for being here. Thank you for modding, and thank you for the 5x5. We also have Prepper Insights checking in with the 5x5. And Hey from Kentucky says David Bays or Baez or Baise. I'm not really sure how we do that one, but I'm going with it. All right, well, good to see everybody. I'm very excited to get things rolling tonight. And let's go ahead and get started just with something I want to bring to your attention. It was actually a local story, or somewhat local to my area. I don't live in this town, but it is in North Dakota, so it was worth talking about. And these are the stories that you should really be paying attention to, even though we're going to go into some national stuff as well as some overseas items tonight when we talk about all these different things that are happening. I still want to make sure that you have this fixation on what's going on locally, and so you can see the red flags that you should probably be watching out for when things occur. So that's what we're going to talk about, this quick story that is, recent here in my area. And I thought it was probably something nobody heard about, but there's some things in this story that give me some pause, you might say, okay? So there's a felon arrested for discharging a gun in city limits. Now, this was in Williston, North Dakota. If you don't know, that's in the northwestern part of the state, and it is an oil boomtown in many ways, and there's a lot of people from all over the country, as well as from other parts of the world, that are there because the oil field works that way. There's a lot of work, and suddenly people can make a lot of money. They come in from all over. So you get a lot of different types, and crime and organized gangs and everyone else follow along because there's a lot of money to be made, which means every industry can benefit economically. So listen to this story really quick, because I want you to pay attention to these things happening in your area. I want you to be more alert to this type of activity, and I want you to consider what this could have been or what this might be leading up to, rather than just a random occurrence, because to me that doesn't look like that's what it is any longer, okay? A Williston man was arrested on Friday afternoon after discharging a gun in the city limits. Marco Antonio Ramos Jimenez, 29, was charged with unlawful possession of a firearm, felon or violent misdemeanor, a Class C felony, and discharge of a firearm within city limits, a Class B misdemeanor. During a bond hearing on Monday afternoon, Ramos Jimenez was assigned a $50,000 cash surety bond. At around 2:50 p.m. Friday, the Williston Police Department was dispatched to the 300 block of West Highland Drive following reports of gunshots in the area. An affidavit, I don't talk right sometimes, for Ramos Jimenez's arrest stated. The reporting party stated that a man was observed to be in possession of a handgun and was running from the location. A physical description of the man: a male subject with a bald head, wearing a vest and carrying a firearm, leaving the area on foot heading west, was also offered to law enforcement, who conducted a search of the area, the Williston Police Department stated in a press release issued Friday afternoon. Okay, during the course of the investigation, law enforcement located spent shell casings in the vicinity of where the gunshots were heard, and also located the firearm, a Smith & Wesson M&P Shield 40 caliber handgun, in a nearby trash can. The man, identified as Ramos Jimenez, was then located by law enforcement in the area of a car which drove through the nearby Cashwise Foods parking lot and left the scene, the affidavit stated. Adding, the vehicle returned to the area, at which time law enforcement conducted a traffic stop. Okay, so here's the thing. This was a strange event that isn't typical in the area. You have somebody who is a felon that is armed, that people are witnessing being armed while walking around, and then I don't know if the claims of them wearing a vest was related to a plate carrier or soft armor, or even just like a winter vest, right? We don't know, but there could be something more there too in that regard. And either way, this is unusual behavior, not to mention, why is this person shooting a firearm in this area when no one was injured and there was no crimes committed otherwise, right? So this is a really interesting and strange scenario, but this is how life is going to start going in all parts of the country, including rural North Dakota, which is why I wanted to share this with everybody, because this is the stuff that I'm concerned about more so than anything else happening in the world because it's happening right here locally, right? And I don't live in Williston, but it's close enough that it's worth keeping an eye on. And that type of activity is a red flag for me when it comes to the escalation of crime, the escalation of possible violence, and the escalation of these types of people in the area, right? People who are willing to have firearms even though they're felons and even though they're barred from owning firearms and everything else related to it, and then shooting them off near a grocery store. It's just odd. So keep an eye on this stuff. And this is also why I conceal carry religiously, because, well, if you can, you should. Now, what's up, Slim Jim? He said, yo, MP. So I had to say hello back. Let's get going, okay? We have some interesting stuff. First off, I want to go over a lot of speculation and some information regarding the eclipse. A lot of people are asking about it. The solar eclipse is creating quite the stir, and it is kind of strange, so I thought it was worth addressing. Now, there are some reasonable things here for why the National Guard is being deployed and why things are occurring, but I'm also just unsure about how valid these concerns really are, which is what makes me question the validity of the necessity of these moves, right? Why are we expanding all these resources for something that just doesn't seem necessarily accurate, right? This is just a little strange, so it's worth at least looking at, okay? Why is the National Guard being deployed during the Great American Eclipse on April 8th? This is from March 20th, 2024. This is from the Economic Collapse, which is more of a blog, but has references of other media outlets. And I do want to say, if you're here on Replay Crew, make sure you check it in the comments. Thanks for being here. Thanks for always checking in. And I just like to say hi to you guys because I don't get a chance to live, okay? So, the National Guard is only supposed to be deployed in emergency situations, but these days the National Guard is being used for all sorts of things. For example, hundreds of National Guard soldiers are being used to check the bags of those riding the subway system in New York City. This is something that I wanted to mention, a couple weeks ago, and something that I think is still worth reminding everyone of. All of this presence of militarized forces in the general public seems to me to be, I would say, strategically creating a normalcy bias, right? To get you used to the concept of a militarized version of American life, right? That's just what it looks like to me. But anyway, that's what this article is also insinuating, okay? This sets a very alarming precedent, and I don't understand why more people aren't upset about this. And now we have learned the National Guard troops will be deployed during the Great American Eclipse on April 8th. What in the world do they expect to happen during this eclipse? Without a doubt, it will certainly be a historic event. As I've discussed previously, it's being projected that it will be the most viewed astronomical event in the entire history of our country. And virtually everyone in North America will be able to view at least a partial eclipse. All right, which is interesting, and honestly, when it comes to stuff like these cosmic events, they are interesting and they are worth experiencing because they don't come around very often. So I understand that. But here's what's strange, okay? On April 8th, millions of Americans will be traveling to locations where they will be in the path of the total solar eclipse. Oklahoma is being touted as one of the best states for that, and is being reported that the Oklahoma National Guard will provide first responders as well as units with hazmat response capabilities. Oklahoma's National Guard is set to be deployed for the upcoming total solar eclipse, when as many as 100,000 people are expected to visit one county. In a statement on Tuesday, the Guard said it would assist emergency management to cope with an unprecedented number of tourists on April 8th in McCurtain County in the southeast of the state. The Guard will provide first responders as well as units with hazmat response capabilities in case of an incident like an industrial fire. I can understand that they feel the need to be prepared, but bringing the National Guard is overkill, don't you think, okay? Residents of Oklahoma are being urged to stock up on gas and groceries prior to the eclipse, and they are also being instructed to have multiple forms of communication besides cellular. To prepare for the eclipse, the state laid out some tips to plan ahead. Oklahomans should schedule errands and appointments a few days in advance before the eclipse, as well as stock up on gas and groceries. The state also recommends having multiple forms of communication besides cellular, being careful on the road, and staying updated on weather conditions, okay? And this person, it is an opinion piece, so be aware of that. Seriously, they want people to do all this for an eclipse that is only going to last a few minutes, okay? And it's true, not only Oklahoma is issuing warnings, many other states are as well, okay? So, I don't necessarily disagree with their assessment that this is odd. Now, I don't think it's unreasonable per se either. If a small town was going to suddenly incur 100,000 people, they don't have the infrastructure to facilitate it. They just don't. They don't have the amount of first responders. They don't have an emergency room that could withstand a multiple amount of people getting injured for whatever could occur. They just don't have the infrastructure in place to deal with that. Not to mention their grocery stores, their markets, their restaurants don't have the inventory on hand to support that large of a population. Now, Desert 1776 says, I don't know anyone interested in viewing the eclipse, LOL. And that's kind of the thing that a lot of people are wondering why this is happening in this way, because they're saying millions of people are going to transcend on all these different parts of the country in order to get a better view of the eclipse. And I don't know if millions of people can afford to do that, let alone have the energy, time, or ability to just do that randomly for an eclipse, right? Like, I understand the desire to, in the sense of seeing something historical and cosmic, and, you know, it's something that I would think would be worth doing if you had the capability. But it seems unreasonable to expect that many people to be displaced and to descend upon these smaller rural communities just to look at the eclipse. I mean, it might be true, but I don't necessarily understand where all these numbers are coming from. Where is this anticipation coming from? What are they referencing in regards to how many people they expect to actually show up to these things, right? This is a really interesting thing and a strange scenario for them to be wargaming, basically. By putting all this infrastructure into place, that's what they're doing, right? So not only is it Oklahoma, but we have all these other states that are concerned with it as well. Map shows warnings for people to stock up on food ahead of solar eclipse, okay? It's from Newsweek. This is from March 18th, okay? Many states within the solar eclipse's path of totality have issued warnings in the weeks leading up to the astronomical phenomenon. On April 8th, the moon will be positioned, yada, yada, talking about the eclipse. The spectacle is expected to draw crowds from around the nation as people head to areas in the path of the totality to witness the eclipse. Officials across the nation have voiced concerns about stretched public safety resources and enormous strain on local hospitals and congested roadways. At least 4 states within the path of totality have urged residents to stock up on groceries before the eclipse. Some officials have already issued disaster declarations ahead of the event, and some schools have decided to close, citing student safety. It makes sense at face value, right? If 1 million people suddenly just migrated to Texas, which, happens all the time, right? But you know what I mean. If 1 million other people suddenly migrate to Texas and all end up in the same town, that's a lot of people to suddenly try to manage. And honestly, there's a lot of people in there that are probably not going to be the best types of people, right? We all know that criminals like to use these opportunities to be opportunistic. That's just how it works, right? So it is very strange that they're putting so much emphasis on it, but it makes sense for what they're claiming. But the other thing is are millions of people really doing this? Like, it kind of reminds me of the trucker brigade that was heading down to the southern border that just never ended up existing. Remember that whole thing? So Texas is doing it. Texas officials have issued a slew of warnings, including that people living within the path of totality should stock up on groceries and gas and run any errands, such as filling prescriptions, in the days before the eclipse. One official also urged pet owners to stock up on supplies for their animals. So if you're in Texas, now you know. Let's see. We also had Oklahoma, which we just talked about, but we have Ohio. Officials in Ohio have said that traffic delays are inevitable. According to News 5 Cleveland, the Ohio Department of Transportation is urging Ohio residents to fill their cars with gas and keep snacks and water handy in case of long delays. I mean, this is what you tell people to get ready for, like, a hurricane. This is what you tell people to get ready for, like, a natural disaster. It is odd, right? We've been through eclipses and astronomical phenomenon before, right? We've seen these things in the past, but we haven't had this level of urgency and warning from our own government, from the states, as well as these numbers. I just don't know where these numbers are coming from. What millions of people are packing everything up and heading to these areas just to witness an eclipse that lasts a few minutes? Like, it doesn't add up, which I wish it did, because I can rationalize why all these things are being done. I can rationalize these warnings. I can rationalize the deployment of the National Guard. I can't necessarily rationalize the millions of people thing. The economy's not good right now. Are people really spending the money to just do this right now? Like in the middle of the school year and whatnot? Like, I don't know. Indiana. Up to 1 million people are expected to travel to Indiana to view the eclipse, according to Indianapolis news station WTHR. And state police are urging residents to prepare for overwhelming traffic. State officials suggest keeping cell phones charged, stocking up on essentials, and filling cars with gas ahead of the eclipse. The same exact information you get before a hurricane, a tornado, or anything else. And this applies to Missouri, New York, and Kentucky. This is just odd. If you're in any of those states, you should be at least considering the fact that your life might be disrupted. But you should also be considering the fact that this just seems weird. And if you are in one of those states, I would love to know after this all happens to just tell us really how it was. Let us know if there was really that big of an influx of people, right? I would love to see that. Or at least be made aware of it. Because and Rebecca Snavely says, magic, they may have totaled up booked hotels, inns, campsites, Airbnbs, etc. 100%, I agree. And that's where you would get that data generally, okay? But I don't, it just doesn't add up, especially to the level of warnings that they're giving people. But there is something we can learn from this regardless, okay? Rental cars unavailable for reservation in Central Texas due to the influx of eclipse watchers. Right. So everybody is telling me, that they have reasons to believe this is accurate. It just seems odd, right? And I personally, I'm not disrupting my life and spending money and going all over the place to watch an eclipse. I would look at it if it was in my area in that way, but I wouldn't go out of my way for it. So maybe I'm just coming from a point of bias here. But there are some strangeness or strange concepts going on around this because of the fact that we're getting all these warnings about something that's happened sometimes. It's not like this. I understand that it's not quite the same level of event, but we have partial eclipses and other things that happen all the time throughout the country, and it doesn't come along with this level of anticipation, right? In Kentucky, I can't see it happening, says Raphael. I don't know. But people are chiming in, and that's why I like that you all are part of this community, because we can actually tell each other what's really going on from a boots on the ground point of view, rather than just relying on our own singular area, right, for good information. So, Hunt Outdoors, I've lived through 5 eclipses in my life, and it's no big deal. Sure, cool and fun, but no biggie. Yeah, I mean, I get that. I understand people's desire to see it. I don't get all of the pieces being put into place right now, I guess. And here's one that I wanted you to look at, because here's where I think we can actually just think about this from the perspective of the golden horde concept, right? And in case you're new to preparedness or you're just new to that concept in general, the golden horde is basically post a disaster, the golden horde gets together and just starts roaming the countryside and pillaging everything in their path, right? They're desperate, they're hungry, and they're willing to act upon their desires, so they will take whatever they want, right? That's the golden horde. The idea is the golden horde will come out of the cities and start just roving the countryside and taking everything that they can along the way, right? So this is what I find interesting regarding this release from New York State about the eclipse, okay? And this is just talking about how to be safe and everything else regarding the eclipse and all the people they're expecting to come into the area and everything else, which I don't know if you could pay me to visit New York these days, but that's just me. So, concerns for the area due to the influx of population. And this is something that you should think about in the post scenario of any disaster, any emergency, but this specifically is referring to this eclipse, which is why I found it a little bit more interesting, okay? Potential for transportation system disruptions and or impacts. Potential for delayed, disrupted emergency service responses and prolonged response times. Potential for stranded motorists, out of the area visitors, and potential weather road concerns. Fuel infrastructure may not be able to support an increase in vehicular traffic. Gridlock traffic may increase fuel, food, and water demand depending on duration. Cellular networks may be overloaded by high volume. Increase in 911 call volume. Do not park or stop in the roadway. If you wish to stop, find a safe location that does not interfere with traffic. That is what they're concerned about when it comes to the large influx of a population, which is something you should definitely keep in mind when it comes to your preparedness. All these things are viable for any disruptive scenario, just like what's going on in Gaza right now, let's say, right? All these people are being displaced and moved about. Everywhere those people move to is strained, and suddenly all the services or infrastructure that was previously available is no longer capable of functioning at the capacity required. This is what it would look like anywhere else in the world as well, and New York State's telling you that right now, just based on a solar eclipse. Apply this to a real emergency scenario, like a massive earthquake or a huge tsunami or something even more catastrophic, an asteroid strike, or I don't know, nuclear war. So all these things are clearly a big concern when it comes to a eclipse. How do you think it would look during a real devastating emergency, right? And the New York State Police make the following recommendations based on expectations. And you guys are going to like one of these. Plan on staying in the region the night of the event. Okay, so they want you to just stay in the region. Don't travel if you don't have to. If you can't stay, fuel charge up the day before the event. Have extra food and water in your vehicle for your trip. Shop the day before. Imagine if they just said this is a good idea in general, not just for an eclipse, right? Local residents should avoid the roadways after the event. So if you're a local, just stay home. It's better for you. Have cell phones charged and bring chargers with you. Schools are recommended to have the day off or a half day. I mean, this is literally disrupting school at this point. I mean, it's kind of crazy. Plan on being in traffic for an extended period. Plan on viewing the event from designated viewing sites. If you're going to view the eclipse, ensure you use the appropriate approved glasses. If from out of the area. Don't use vehicles that can't travel for 10 plus hours without charging. Stranded electric vehicles in traffic will be towed. I found that one to be a little bit more entertaining and interesting because apparently you shouldn't have an electric vehicle. I mean, that's just where it's at. If you do have one, you should probably have a gas vehicle as a backup plan. Because even New York State Police is telling, and this is from like a very, Democrat-ran liberal state in general when it comes to their energy policies, right? And they're going to promote electric vehicles at every chance they can get. But during an emergency, it's a bad idea because if you can't drive for 10 hours, it's just not even worth having. And they're telling you they're going to tow your EV if you bring it to the party. So I thought that was at least interesting. But regardless, there were some things in there that we could apply to any other emergency scenario. But it is interesting that those things that we could apply to any other emergency scenario of a much more disastrous form, like I said, a nuclear war, an earthquake, a tsunami, whatever it could be, is being applied to a solar eclipse, right? So it's very strange. Florida Sheepdog One says it's going to awake the zombies. You never know, right? If the zombies really are true undead zombies, I will be highly confused by that because I never expected that to be the way it was actually going to go. So let's see here. Let's go through here for a second. We got FEMA Region 5 is ready for the solar boog, says Sherman Sales. And that's just how it's going. I mean, things are getting weird out there, okay? So let's go talk about some of the things happening overseas now because there's been a lot of activity and a lot of action over there. And all these things take a long time, right? We tend to have this idea that wars and hostilities happen fast because when you look back on them in history, it's a short period of time compared to the grand scheme of things. And so you assume that everything will be quick and accelerated and you won't have to actually be dragged through the mud in the process of trying to wait and see if we're actually going to get out of this mess or if it's actually going to make things much, much, much worse. So we're on track for them to be much worse. Okay, and everyone is also saying to watch out for the Devil's Comet as well, which is also another astronomical event that's occurring. So just be aware of that. Let's see here. Planners Freedom sees there's some conspiracy about this being something bad. There's a lot of speculation, especially in the dark, deep corners of the internet. But my opinion is that it's unlikely that anything bad will happen. It makes sense. It's reasonable in the sense of expecting 1 million people to suddenly show up at your doorstep to have plans in place and infrastructure in place and activate the National Guard to help with law enforcement duties or first responder duties or whatever else they might need. Like, for all I know, that's their major plan. But it does seem a little odd. It does seem out of place. And there are some things to consider regarding that I want you all to be aware of, which we're going to talk about basically right now. Also, Ace McLean earlier said the news is talking about a solar storm, and that is true. The solar storm, it started hitting us yesterday, I believe. It was a G4 geomagnetic storm that was hitting us. It's very high on the severity list. We're talking a scale of 1 to 5, and it was a 4. So it had the potential to do a lot more damage, or who knows what else it could have pulled off. So it's definitely something to be aware of as well. But speaking of large crowds gathering in areas and suddenly telling everyone to be prepared for who knows what, and then activating the National Guard, we got to talk about what happened in Moscow. Okay? So this is something that is going to push things further into a negative direction, at least in my opinion. This isn't going to help with peace talks. This isn't going to help with de-escalation or anything. So regardless of what happened there, it's going to make things worse. But this also reminds us that these types of attacks can occur. And if everything is true at face value of what occurred there, and everything is 100% accurate to the T of, like, these were members of ISIS that perpetrated this attack and everything else regarding it, then we have to be aware that large gatherings are a target for these groups, and these groups did say that they were going to start doing bad things because of what's happening between Israel and Gaza, right? And we have this solar eclipse that is being broadcast all over the place as being, the place to be, where everyone's going to gather there, and millions of people are showing up, and they're all going to be in one place at one time watching this event that's going to make everything dark for like a few minutes, right? So I don't know. If I was someone who was worried about my safety and my security, and I wasn't necessarily overly concerned about, I don't know, witchcraft or something else that might be pertinent to a solar eclipse, then I would probably avoid some of those viewing areas or some of those designated spots where people are supposed to go to watch this particular event, because it would seem very highly likely to be a soft target in many ways. So, but that's just how I look at the world these days. I'm not necessarily an optimist anymore. So, Russian President Vladimir Putin said Monday that the gunmen who killed 139 people at a suburban Moscow concert hall are radical Islamists, but he repeated his accusation that Ukraine could have played a role despite Kiev's strong denials. This is from March 25th, 2024. 2 days after the Islamic State's Afghanistan affiliate claimed responsibility for Friday night's attack at the music venue, Putin acknowledged during a meeting with government officials that the killings were carried out by extremists whose ideology the Islamic world has been fighting for centuries. Putin, who declared over the weekend that the 4 attackers were arrested while trying to escape to Ukraine, said investigators haven't determined who ordered the attack, but that it was necessary to find out why the terrorists, after committing their crime, tried to flee to Ukraine and who was waiting for them there. The IS affiliate claimed it carried out the attack, and U.S. intelligence said it had information confirming the group was responsible. French President Emmanuel Macron said France has intelligence pointing to an IS entity as responsible for the attack as well. Just be aware that the U.S. made a warning of such an attack a couple weeks before this occurred. So that is also something that has created some tension there because of the fact that this actually did happen. And the U.S. seemed to be aware of it to at least some degree with prior notice. Okay, so this all happened. There is over 100 people who were injured. Let's see, we have 139 people were killed. We have 180 were injured. 100 people remain hospitalized. The place was attacked by 4 gunmen, basically, and they lit it on fire, and they used explosives and all kinds of stuff. And it was a very egregious attack. It's something that we don't want to see in any happening to any innocent people, regardless of where they live. That's just real life. So, now, you might ask yourself, why is ISIS or ISIL or ISK or any of the ISIS, I don't know, there's all kinds of ISIS, they're everywhere. I can't even keep a track of it anymore. But why are they attacking Russia? Because I don't understand. I thought they were our enemy, and I thought they had friends there, or I thought they were supporting Iran and Syria and all these kind of, well, here's something we got to talk about, okay? Nick, you said Kate Middleton's last video looked fake, like AI made. Thoughts? You know what? I don't know. I didn't see it. I'm not gonna lie to you, Nick. If there's one thing that I super don't care about, it's the royal family. And I just try to remember that we stopped caring about them about, where are we at now? 250 years ago. So I had to do weird math for a minute there. So why are they targeting Russia? You would think that with everything going on between Israel and Gaza and all the things that were being claimed down there, that it would be more of a Western target, right? Just because of the climate right now, okay? So this is from Al Jazeera, which, at least is from that region when it comes to understanding the way that some of these people decide to act. Moscow concert hall attack. Why is ISIL targeting Russia, okay? So all this has been talked about. A total of 11 people were detained, but the 4 people who were directly involved with it were also detained. So just be aware of that. There may or may not be some videos going around, and there may or may not be some implications of a level of interrogation. I don't know. But let's go all the way down here to where we actually get into the part of the story we wanted to talk about, right? Why is ISIL attacking Russia? Defense and security analysts say the group has targeted its propaganda at Russian President Vladimir Putin in recent years over the alleged oppression of Muslims by Russia. Russian foreign policy has been one big red flag for ISIL. Michael Kugelman, director of the South Asia Institute of the Washington-based Wilson Center, told Al Jazeera. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, Russian actions in Chechnya, Moscow's close relationships with the Syrian and Iranian governments, and especially the military campaigns that Russia has waged against ISIS fighters in Syria and through Wagner Group mercenaries in parts of Africa. All of that has meant that Moscow has become a focus of ISKP's ice kippa now. We're just doing all the ice. Extensive propaganda war, said Amira Jadoun, assistant professor at Clemson University in South Carolina and co-author of The Islamic State in Afghanistan and Pakistan, Strategic Alliances and Rivalries. Russia's engagement in the global fight against ISIS and its affiliates, especially through its military operations in Syria and its efforts to establish connections with the Afghan Taliban, ISIS-K's rival, marks Russia as a key adversary for ISIS-K, Jadoun told Al Jazeera. Now, hold on a second. Russia's engagement in the global fight against ISIS. I thought we were in the global fight against ISIS. I thought that's something the West was doing. Russia was doing that too? That seems weird. But also, they back Syria. But we don't like Syria. But we're also fighting ISIS. Why is this so confusing? Should the Moscow attack be definitely attributed to ISKP, Jadoun said, the group hopes to win support and advance its goal to evolve into a terrorist organization with global influence by demonstrating that it can launch attacks within Russian territory. Okay? Now, Vladimir Putin has said that he thinks Ukraine is involved, basically, right? At some level, in some capacity, he thinks Ukraine is involved. And I'm not sure why the feed is a little bit choppy tonight, but we're working on it. It keeps saying that my Wi-Fi is struggling, but interestingly enough, I'm hardwired. So I don't know how that's supposed to work. But either way, there's some things you should know, just in case you don't, right? But this really concerns me. In the Woods says Vanilla Ice, one of my favorite ices, actually. If you didn't actually get to go to a Ninja Turtle concert when you were about 4 years old, then I'm sorry, because it was amazing. But either way, Putin is basically pointing his finger at the West, saying there was some level of involvement there, right? This attack is going to escalate things no matter how you want to look at it. But the thing you have to keep in mind that the media is not going to report on or remind you of or constantly beat the drum on is the fact that ISIS was directly supported by the U.S., and now they're the ones, claiming that they did this. I don't know if that could be misconstrued, but here we're going to look at a quick little declassified document together, because that's always a good time, right? You guys like to read declassified documents from time to time? I know I do. And you know what? Just in case anybody's wanting to do a little bit of research in their own time, I will put the declassified document in the live chat, so that way you can check it out for yourself if you would like, because it just tells you everything you want to know in here. But we're going to go down and go to some of the important parts here, okay? So let's see here. We're going to talk about how Al-Qaeda, who is also listed here as ISIS, basically, is fighting Syria and how we back them to do so because it's beneficial for the rest of the Middle East, okay? Here we go. The regime's priority is to concentrate its presence in areas along the coast, talking about Syria. However, it has not abandoned Homs because it controls the major transportation routes in Syria. The regime decreased its concentration in areas adjacent to the Iraqi borders, Al-Haska and Deir Zor. Okay, Al-Qaeda, Iraq. AQI is familiar with Syria. AQI trained in Syria and then infiltrated into Iraq. AQI supported the Syrian opposition from the beginning, both ideologically and through the media. AQI declared its opposition of Assad's government because it considered it a sectarian regime targeting Sunnis. AQI conducted a number of operations in several Syrian cities under the name of Jaish al-Nusra, Victorious Army, one of its affiliates. AQI, through the spokesman of the Islamic State of Iraq, ISI, not quite IS yet, but we're almost there, Abu Muhammad al-Ajani, declared the Syrian regime as the spearhead of what he is naming Jibha al-Rufad, or al-Ruwaft, forefront of the Shiites because of the Syrian regime declaration of war on the Sunnis. Additionally, is calling on the Sunnis in Iraq, especially the tribes in the border regions, to wage war against the Syrian regime, regarding Syria as an infidel regime for its support to the infidel party Hezbollah and other regimes he considers dissenters like Iran and Iraq. So these guys are against Iran, and they're against Syria, and they're against Hezbollah. Okay, so that's okay. So think about that for a minute and just be aware of the fact that all of this is being put together by the Western allies, because this is something that they're saying is beneficial for the Middle East, okay? And basically, internally events are taking a clear sectarian direction. The Salafist, the Muslim Brotherhood, and AQI are the major forces driving the insurgency in Syria. The West Gulf countries, and Turkey support the opposition, while Russia, China, and Iran support the regime. The West. Okay? It's all right there for you. We all knew this, but some might not, which is why I wanted to share this document, because this is legitimate declassified information. This is not anything that's being hidden from the public eye, which means we are, involved to some degree, and now these people are attacking Russia directly in Moscow. If you want to talk about proxy wars exist all over the planet, right? We have a proxy war going on in many ways right now in Ukraine because of how we're funding everyone there and how we're supplying them, right? And how we have boots on the ground training people and all the things regarding that, and that's what it's been referred to in many, many ways. And that's exactly what was going on here, okay? And right here it tells us that. Development of the current events into proxy war. With support from Russia, China, and Iran, the regime is controlling the areas of influence along coastal territories, Tartus and Latakia, and is fiercely defending Homs, which is considered the primary transportation route in Syria. On the other hand, opposition forces are trying to control the eastern areas, Hasaka and Deir Zor, adjacent to the western Iraqi provinces, Mosul and Anbar. In addition to neighboring Turkish borders, Western countries, the Gulf states, and Turkey are supporting these efforts. This hypothesis is most likely in accordance with the data from recent events, which will help prepare safe havens under international sheltering, similar to what transpired in Libya when Benghazi was chosen as the command center of the temporary government. Okay, so this is information available to us, also highly available to Russia. They have their own intelligence organizations that have all that information that we don't even have access to. So just be aware of the fact that there's more to this story than just, well, it was ISIS, right? Because the West funded and supplied and created ISIS in many ways. I don't know what else to say. It's all right there. Google it. Like, even just on Google. You don't even have to go to DuckDuckGo or any other better search engine. Google will tell you right off the bat. So understand why this is problematic in the eyes of Russia, regardless of who directly supported the situation, okay? So, now, another thing to keep in mind is that not only am I concerned about this eclipse situation because of the possibility of a terrorist attack and the possibility of a soft target type scenario, but we're also in a global conflict right now. We're not maybe directly involved, right? People always want to bring that up. Well, until we're shooting our guns directly at Russians or Chinese, then we're not actually in the war, right? Okay, if that's how you want to view it, that's fine. You might be a little bit behind when things actually escalate to that point when everyone else agrees, right? But here's the thing. During these times, large gatherings and large happenings occurring in a country like the United States are more dangerous inherently, which is another reason why the National Guard might be being activated, another reason why people might be being told to be prepared, maybe not because they're worried about something happening directly to us in that moment, but at any moment, this war could escalate into a whole new beast compared to what it is right now. And if that happened, while millions of people are displaced and away from their homes, the least the government would want to see is them to have some light level of preparation so they could hopefully maybe get back home without having to require aid, right? Because if you leave a massive population somewhere in the middle of the country that has nowhere to go in the middle of a wartime scenario, well, you just created a massive refugee camp, and that's not beneficial to anybody, right? So you're already starting behind. You already have a refugee scenario occurring, and you haven't even taken the first shot. So be aware of that. There could be that level of preparedness being invoked as well, just because of the current climate of what's happening in Europe, even though the media seems to want us to kind of believe that everything's just, par of the course now, right? Everything's fine. So if that's the case, then why is French guy, Macron guy, doing this, right? I don't even want to talk about his personal life. Oh, man, there's some things, France raises security alert to highest level after Moscow attack. French Prime Minister Gabriel Attal said Sunday that the country is raising its security alert to the highest level after Friday's Moscow concert hall attack. Okay. Given the claim of responsibility for the attack by the Islamic State and the threats weighing on our country, have decided to raise the Vigipirate state to its highest level. Emergency attack, said Attal, raising the level again just 3 months after it was lowered in January. President Emmanuel Macron called in his top ministers and advisors on Sunday night to the Elysee Palace, I don't know why I can't read French, to discuss the implications of the assault at the Crocus City Hall just outside the Russian capital on Friday evening. They will meet on Monday to flesh out security plans moving forward, okay? French police are in the process of finalizing their plans to ensure safety during the Olympic and Paralympic Games this summer in Paris and in several cities throughout the country. Keep that in mind too. The Olympics are in Paris this summer, right before the U.S. elections, during a wartime scenario in Europe. You could not pay me to go to those Olympics. I'm not going. I'm just not going to go. Okay. Now, they also claim that they have evidence that ISIS was trying to attack France as well. So that's something that I think is also interesting. Macron says Islamists who hit Russia had tried to attack France. Is it to that level of chaos generation where they're just going to attack any country that's vulnerable in order to establish themselves? Quite possibly. Or is this another way to divert the possibility that there was Western involvement? I don't know, right? I don't know the answer to these questions, but I do like to ask them because it makes us all as a community think about the possibility of these things occurring, right? Why would France say this is happening? Well, it might have actually happened, but also it could be for some other benefits. Paris, March 25th, Reuters, and that's today. President Emmanuel Macron said on Monday that the gunmen who killed all of those people in the concert hall outside of Moscow are part of an Islamic State branch that was behind foiled attempts to attack France over the past few months. This explains why the French government on Sunday increased the country's security alert to its highest level. Macron and Prime Minister Gabriel Attal said more soldiers will be put on standby and ready to patrol sensitive sites, including schools. Is France also trying to get their population to have some normalcy bias to the idea of being militarized in the public space? It might be. I would also wonder, I don't know, think about these two sentences together, right? The perpetrators of the attack on Moscow were part of an Islamic State branch that was behind foiled attempts to attack France over the past few months. They've been trying to attack them over the past few months. This explains why the French government on Sunday increased the country's security alert. Hold on, I'm going to sit on that for a second. So you have had attack attempts over the last few months from this exact same branch of ISIS. But only now, after Russia was actually attacked, does it make sense to raise the security alert to its highest level? Okay, sure. Because all those other attacks. Islamic State claimed responsibility for Friday's Moscow attack. Okay, Russia, which has challenged assertions by the United States that the Islamic State militant group orchestrated the mass shooting in Moscow, continued on Monday to suggest Ukraine was to blame. Macron said this was cynical and counterproductive. This attack was claimed by Islamic State, Macron said. He doesn't know what to call them anymore either. And the information available to us, to our intelligence services, as well as to our main partners, indicates indeed that it was an entity of the Islamic State which instigated and carried out this attack. This specific group had over the past months carried out several attack attempts on our soil, he added. Attal later said that these included a foiled planned attack on the city of Strasbourg in eastern France. The claim of responsibility for the Moscow attack by a branch of the Islamic State that planned attacks in European countries, including France, prompted us to increase the Vigipirate security threat assessment to its highest level. Okay, so, listen. Apparently, they had attacks as well. They foiled them, but that didn't make them raise their security level. The attack in another country, very far away, farther away than a lot of other European countries to Russia, that made them raise their security level. These are things that I ask questions about. Like, why is that important now, right? I don't know. But I do find it interesting that that's what we're concerned about. So just be aware that France is going all me too, right? And there could be other reasons for why. Because it does have a level of perception you can build off of that when it comes to not being able to have the blame placed on you when you're also the victim, right? We know how that works in the minds of criminals. We also know how that works in the minds of certain aspects of our country and the way that they think ideologically, that, as long as you're all a victim, you can't be blamed for any of the bad things you do. Okay? So, let's see here. Florida Sheepdog 1 says, we have ways of making you talk. Okay, MP, I need that seat in my car, just saying. Yeah, no, it's a racer seat. I feel like I could really get going in this chair. I'm not going to lie, Every good streamer has to have like a gaming chair, right? So I was like, gaming chair. Oh, this one. Got it, right? So here we are. All right, looks like I missed some people here. Lone Wolf, hashtag Magic Prepper. I like it. Florida Sheepdog, John is on the chair. John is on the chair. You got to love me some Red Dawn code language. Can't go wrong. My website actually has a little marquee, magicprepper.com, that just scrolls by saying like John has a long mustache and all those, the chairs in the corner and all that good stuff. And I've actually had people message me because there's a contact form on my website that literally were concerned by it. They were like, what's going on? What are you trying to tell us? And I was like, I'm sorry. I just thought it was, kind of like satire in a way, but also a reference to a really good movie. This one right here, which is a poster, or actually, well, it's a canvas that all of you voted on a long, long time ago when I first started these live streams. So thanks for that. You guys are the real GOATs here. So what else is going on with France? Because they're weird sometimes, right? I think so. French military chief backs Macron over possibility of sending troops to Ukraine. Oh, that's awesome. This was from 3 days ago. Russia should not expect the West to limit its support for Ukraine to supplying arms, says the chief of staff of France's armed forces, General Thierry Bouchard. His words echo President Emmanuel Macron's recent controversial suggestion that a military intervention could not be ruled out. The war will end when Russia stops attacking, Bouchard told reporters on Thursday, following talks in Paris with General Michael Biden, the armed forces chief of new NATO member Sweden. I'm sure there's no relation. Russian President Vladimir Putin had built his operation, he added, on the idea that the West would never go into Ukraine but simply supply arms. We have to show him that he will not be able to use this logic to go all the way, because this idea is not right, Bouchard said as he urged Europe to be prepared to take risks. The war in Ukraine affects us because we are impacted by its consequences. Europeans must therefore be capable of taking risks to ensure the security of Europe in the decade to come. Bouchard's comments come after Macron recently smashed a major taboo by floating the possibility of sending Western troops to Ukraine. While a number of EU states flatly reject the idea, Macron has refused to back down, insisting his words were well thought through and stressing that France would not follow the logic of escalation with Moscow. Prepare for war. While Germany and Central European countries say they will not send forces to Ukraine, France has found an ally in Sweden. Oh, Sweden, you used to be so nice. Faced with an increasingly belligerent Russia, Sweden's army chief Biden in January urged his country to mentally prepare for war. Sweden's military has been boosting its preparedness since Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014. The country reintroduced its limited conscription in 2017 and dropped 2 centuries of military non-alignment to join NATO in March. It used to be so neutral. We have a war raging in Europe. We cannot let this become a normality, Biden said. Sweden is ready to shoulder its responsibilities, deterrence, and defense. France and Sweden regularly conduct joint military exercises, while the Nordic nation also took part in the French-led Takuba task force of EU special forces in Mali. Takuba. I can't say words. It's fine. Well, do you guys think it's going to escalate over there? Do you guys think it's just going to happen? Let's do this. Donald Massey, you do amuse me. I appreciate you. Now, I don't know if you're talking to me anyway, but I just think it's going very well, and I wanted to say hello. Let's see. Will NATO and Russia be in a direct war by summer? That's what we're going to say. Okay, let me know your thoughts. I just ran a poll in the live chat. I always like to know everybody's input and to kind of see where the community is when it comes to how they're feeling about things, because a lot of stuff's happening. Now, regarding that, the French are also conducting tests and running drills and doing things you would do before, I don't know, going to war with Russia. They seem very set on this. And that's concerning. I mean, they're a nuclear power. They are in NATO, aka we would have to back them technically, right? There's a lot of concern here. French Air Force conducts tests simulating operations with ground troops. Okay, this is from March 21st, 4 days ago. For their annual exercise known as VOLFA, running from March 11th to March 29th, French airmen have trained to protect bases or movements of ground forces under the threat of enemy air power, which could be Russian. It seems like this drill has a little bit of a focus to it. Albeit half-heartedly, Colonel Frank acknowledged that the exercise known as VOLFA, which he directs, has come to a razor's edge in 2024. This training exercise, held once a year, is the most important such exercise undertaken by the French Air and Space Forces. This year, it was taking place from March 11th to the 29th, mainly around the Mont de Marsan Air Force Base in the southwestern Lens region of France. The deafening sound of Rafale and Mirage 2000D aircraft taking off and landing invaded the nearby town. The inhabitants of Mont de Marsan are used to it. Yet this year's scenario is also clearly in line with current events and the debates surrounding the possible dispatching of military personnel to Ukraine, as has been mentioned on several occasions by the French president. Interesting. I wonder if there's any purpose behind why they would make these drills and simulations so similar to what would happen if they actually sent troops in, okay? As is always the case with this type of exercise, fictitious and real elements of geopolitical context were mixed together. This year, however, some of those elements that were made public were the protection of high-value areas and movements of ground forces faced with an enemy air threat. In short, these could show what efforts to secure sites to which French and Western troops would be sent in Ukraine or elsewhere on the Eastern Front might look like. Even though this type of training never mentions the names of existing countries and is supposed to prepare for operations anywhere in the world, the aim is to show that we are credible, said Lieutenant Colonel Jan, 49, the leader of a Mirage 2000D detachment who had come down from the eastern French city of Nancy. Okay, so it sounds like they are considering the fact that they may have to do what they're talking about. Not a fan. I get why they might want to do that, but I just don't like the idea of nuclear war. So the whole thing's a mess. And I said this from the beginning, and I know it might be an unpopular opinion. And I also know my internet says I don't have good internet even though I'm hardwired, so I'm confused about that as well. But what I will say, hurry up, computer, catch up. Why is this happening? What I will say is, if you're going to be in a war, be in a war, right? Get it done and end it. Wars of attrition take a toll no matter what. And neither side is getting it done. So what are we doing? I don't know. That's just how it feels to me. It's unfortunate, but that's just what it is. Now, Donald Massey, thanks for joining the Magic Channel membership. I really appreciate it. Listen, if you're a channel member, like you are now, or if you're a Subscribe Star member, I have the private live stream tonight at 9:45 p.m. Central Standard Time, and it's right after this live stream, and the link will be on the community tab on my channel page. So make sure you check that out if you don't mind hanging out tonight, Donald. But we just have a good chat. It's nothing informative. I don't hold any information behind a paywall or anything like that. I gave people a reason or an opportunity to support the channel directly financially if they wanted to. And because those people feel the need to do so, I want to provide them with some level of thanks. And this is how I have decided to provide that. So make sure you check that out tonight. And if you want to join the Subscribe Star, that is also an option for you. And I will put a link in the live chat to that as well. Now, there's other stuff there too, which can be cool once in a while. I do my best, all right? So let's talk about some other stuff going on in Europe, considering this whole escalatory scenario, thanks to, I don't know, rogue missiles flying around. Poland says Russia missile entered its airspace during latest major attack on Ukraine. Okay, this is not good. This is where problems begin to happen. Okay, Poland says Russian missile entered its airspace. Never good. They demanded an explanation from Russia on Sunday after one of its missiles strayed briefly into Polish airspace during a major missile attack on Ukraine, prompting the NATO member to activate F-16 fighter jets. That's not good. This is more stuff happening. Now, I'm not saying it's not good that they activated their fighter jets. I mean, if a missile comes into your territory, you got to do what you got to do. I'm just saying that this just shows that the longer this thing goes on for, the more of this stuff can happen. It was Russia's third big missile attack on Ukraine in the past 4 days, and the second to target the capital, Kiev. The governor of the Lviv region, Maxim Kozitsky, said on the Telegram platform that critical infrastructure was hit, but he didn't specify what precisely was struck. No deaths or injuries were reported. Later, authorities said that rescuers had just put out a fire at a critical infrastructure facility in the Lviv region, which had been attacked with missiles and drones at night and in the morning. Okay, let's see here. We're going to talk about Poland a little bit more. Polish Defense Minister Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz says, later told reporters at a televised news conference that the Russian missile would have been shot down had there been any indication it was headed towards a target in Poland. He said that Polish authorities monitored the attack on Ukraine and were in contact with Ukrainian counterparts. Polish and NATO F-16s were activated as part of the strategic response. He said the missile penetrated Polish airspace about 1 kilometer or 2 as Russia was targeting the region around Lviv in western Ukraine. Okay, so we have breaches of borders of NATO allies with missiles, right? This has happened before, but it's still happening. Every time this happens, it's a possible catalyst, right? With an eye on Russia's war in neighboring Ukraine, Poland readies a new self-defense law. This is from 3 days ago. Now, this is interesting. They just had a missile enter their territory, and they're like, you know what, this is getting too real. I think Poland, and a lot like France, I think they're both starting to realize that this war isn't just going to stop, and that the longer it goes on for, the better chance of something bad happening there is, and that they might have to get involved regardless, or at least, at the bare minimum, start making preparations for their people. Now, this is something I wish our government would start doing, but they haven't. So, let's see what Poland's doing. Poland's government has prepared new legislation to boost the nation's capacity for self-defense, including more funding for first aid courses, better public warning systems, and more emergency shelters, officials said Friday. I think that's a good idea, and I think that we should do that here as well. Honestly, I'd like more funding for more first aid courses. I would like more emergency shelters, better public warning systems. It's not a bad idea. The fact that there's fallout shelters all around me, and all of them are defunct. None of them are maintained. None of them are in working order. None of them are stocked. They're just empty for no reason. Like, why are they empty? They could just be stocked for no other reason than it's storage, right? But instead, they're just completely dilapidated. Why? Especially now with everything happening. There's no excuse, right? Anyway, Ministers of Defense of the Interior said the bill was prompted by the war that neighboring Ukraine is fighting against Russia's aggression. Russia has recently captured territory in the east, while Ukraine is running critically low on ammunition. The legislation will be put out before Parliament, probably in May, after consultations with the public and with local authorities, ministers said. Because of the developments we can see across our eastern border, we are taking about extreme situations, about an armed conflict, said Marcin Kierwinski, Minister of the Interior and Administration. Poland is one of Ukraine's staunchest supporters on the military and the humanitarian levels and has taken in almost 1.5 million refugees. Okay, so they're worried about it. They're concerned, and it makes sense. By the way, in the poll, 2/3 of you think NATO and Russia will be in a direct war by this summer. 1/3 does not, which I totally understand. But I do find that to be interesting because at the bare minimum, 2/3 of the community have a bad feeling, basically, that this is going to escalate into something bigger very soon based on a lot of these recent events. And that is a problem. We don't want to have things escalate out of control to where we can't turn back, but here we are. So, law of the minimum. What's your favorite hollow point 9mm EDC ammo for your G19? Well, I generally go G45 or G19X these days. I just decided the hands just need that full size, right? Well, depending. Other pistols, there's some more leeway. But regardless, 147 grain federal HSTs. That's where I'm at these days. So, hey, if it doesn't work for you, that's fine. There's some other good options, but those are some impressive rounds. Okay? Now, Russia may be prepping for imminent war with NATO? What? Of course. That's what all of you are worried about, or 2/3 of you at least. The Institute for the Study of War has reported that Russian President Vladimir Putin is potentially preparing for war with NATO sooner than previously anticipated. This is from March 23rd. The Institute for the Study of War has reported that Russian President Vladimir Putin is potentially preparing for war with NATO sooner than previously anticipated. This assessment is based on various Russian financial, economic, and military indicators. Putin's recent military decrees, which reestablished the Moscow and Leningrad military districts, are seen by the ISW as preparation for a large-scale war with NATO. These decrees have reorganized Russia's military administrative structure and incorporated territories of Ukraine into the Leningrad military district, suggesting Russia's intent to maintain control over those areas. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they're planning on maintaining that control. NATO has expressed unwavering support for Ukraine's sovereignty and has provided unprecedented levels of support since Russia's full-scale invasion. The alliance has condemned Russia's aggression and has imposed severe sanctions to weaken Russia's war capabilities. Amid rising tensions, Baltic nations are enhancing their military defenses in preparation for potential conflict. This includes the creation of kill zones to funnel Russian soldiers in the event of war. Okay? With U.S. funding for Ukraine in limbo, European allies are increasing their support as Russia continues its military strikes. The ISW notes that Russia is preparing for a wider conflict with NATO, and while the timeline is not immediate, it is likely shorter than previously thought. NATO's principle of collective defense means that an attack on one member is considered an attack on all. While Ukraine is not a NATO member, it has been promised eventual membership, and the alliance works closely with Ukraine to modernize its armed forces. So, they're saying Russia's getting ready and is probably going to be ready sooner than we thought for war with NATO, not just Ukraine. And I think a lot of the words we've heard out of Putin recently back that up. And I also think that him winning that re-election, which I don't think any of us thought wasn't going to happen, but that re-election being won and him having 6 more years of control means he's got the time to do it now, right? So there's a lot happening. Okay, if you guys want my honest just suggestion moving forward towards this April 8th solar eclipse thing, if you're in the states that are getting warnings about stocking up on supplies and fuel and making sure your phones are charged and all that, I would consider staying put during that time just to kind of avoid any large gatherings or maybe avoid any disruption to your life. Being stuck in a massive traffic jam or who knows what definitely isn't quite worth it generally. And if you're not in one of those states, I would at least just think about what's happening nearby and consider the fact that it could be, more than what meets the eye. I'm not saying it is. I don't have any evidence that it is. And I don't think personally that that's what's going to happen. I don't think it's going to be some black swan type event just because there's a strange level of preparation for it. But I do think that it's worth at least keeping an eye on. because we just don't know what can happen anymore at this point in time. There's a lot of weird stuff going on. And don't forget, look, I don't care how you feel or what religion you are or any of that kind of stuff. Like, that's not what we do here. I want more Americans to be better prepared so that we can all make it happen when we need to make it happen, right? When it comes to coming together as a community and taking care of each other as Americans, right? And all of you from other countries too, the Canadians, the English, which is, do we call you Brits now? I'm not sure how that works. But anyway, all you other good people, you're good too. I want you to build community as well. But what I'm trying to say is, regardless of your religion or anything like that, understand that, it's pretty hard to deny the fact that there's an existence of good and evil, right? And there are people out there that look at these cosmic events as being something more than just space. And so who knows what type of opportunity they might take during these types of events because it aligns with their beliefs or their ideology or their thought process, right? So there's just things to keep in mind regarding all that. But in general, just be smart about how you're going to act in that time, okay? And with all this escalation going on with this war in Europe, let's be hopeful. And I'm just going to say this as optimistically as I can. Let's be hopeful that if something occurs that pushes us towards, let's be hopeful that we get a warning or a heads up, right? So that we can better fortify ourselves against whatever it is that's happening. Because who knows, right? Will we actually get that preliminary warning of a tactical nuclear strike on a singular military target to kind of let the world know that this is getting real? Or will it just immediately be mass cyber attack, shut down the grid, and then no one knows what's happening anymore? Like, I don't know, right? So just be aware, though, that every day this happens, this war could happen in a very bad way to anyone on the planet. And we might be seeing some of those preparations when it comes to the solar eclipse under the guise of, oh, well, we're just worried about infrastructure and everything else. When in reality, they're just saying, there's a lot of people congregating in these areas. And right now, since we're in a global conflict, we don't want to leave ourselves wide open to a potential attack, right? I don't know. So, a Gate Beowulf says, if we get there, we get there. And that is true. We don't have control over that. Michael223 says 100. And I appreciate your support and the fact that we're on the same page. I really do. Bob from accounting, good to see you. Planners, Freedom Seeds, good to see you as well. Yardbirds is here. I always like that. We also have the Watchman, Hugh Junnett, Porky Prepper. You know what? I think I'm going to have to call it a night. We're at the hour mark or a little past. Like I said, if you want to join the YouTube channel memberships, hit that join button down below. That way you can be part of the private live stream, which starts in about 10 minutes or less, actually. If you want to be a Subscribe-Star member, you can actually get the link, and I'll just pop that back in the chat again real quick. And then you can also be part of the live stream there. If you are a channel member, go to the community tab on my channel page in order to get there tonight. If you're a Subscribe-Star member, it'll be on the front page of your Subscribe-Star stream right there. And if there's anything else at all you need from me, magicpepper.com is a great place to go. You can contact me directly there. You can also check out all my sponsors and affiliates. There's discount codes. There's all kinds of stuff on that website. So make sure you guys check that out. And besides that, that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.